When it comes to found footage movies, I find it's always fun to figure out the why behind the masterpiece. Maybe there's a legend there. Maybe it's someone's twisted imagination. Maybe it's simply just a demented idea that got funding. And today, folks, we're gonna break down some famous movies together. Dear Zachary is a good one to start out with since it's a doozy and a half. The full title is Dear Zachary, a letter to a son about his father, and it's a 2008 American film written, produced, directed, edited, filmed, and scored by Kurt Quinn. Yeah, he did everything. It's about Kurt's close friend, Andrew Bagby, who was killed after ending a relationship with a woman named Shirley Jean Turner. Now, she was arrested as a suspect, and shortly thereafter announced she was pregnant with Andrew's offspring, a boy she named Zachary. So Kurt was like, okay, I want to make a video for Zachary about how his dad, because he wants Zachary to know just how great of a man his dad was. And the drama that unfolds while he's making this movie is insane. Like, it's real. It isn't really like true crime, like it's just visceral. Yes, there's parts that are heartwarming, but a lot of it is heartbreaking. And the filmmaker had no idea most of the content of this movie was going to happen. Like, this is only something you can really watch if you're in like an okay emotional state. Because the worst part about it, spoiler alert, the son ends up being killed by the mother right before she takes her own life. Look, I did mention this was dark and awful, right? Ergo why I wanted to get it out of the way first. So in 2009, after watching the film, Canadian MP Scott Andrews introduced Bill C-464, also known as Zachary's Bill, to the Parliament of Canada, and it helps protect young descendants in relation to bail hearings, custody disputes, and it was signed into the law the following year. So yes, while some good came out of this mess, it's still just so awful. House LLC takes place in the aftermath of a haunted house attraction going badly wrong, leaving over a dozen people dead and the police and press with a lot of questions. Years later, the makers of a documentary about the tragedy meet with Sarah, the only known survivor of the team behind Hell House, and she gives them never-before-seen footage detailing to the build-up that fateful night and what really happened. Look, I'm a scare actor myself, so I loved every minute of watching this film. It hits all the right notes. It's incredibly creepy, it has a consistent feel and pace throughout, and it has good actors in all the main roles. The documentary format lends an air of realism to the story, and it is very well done. Like, it does such an effective job of blurring the lines that a lot of viewers wondered, was there a real Abaddon Hotel tragedy true story? And while it does a great job seeding in the lore of the tragedy, Hell House is not based on a real story. The filmmakers filmed this movie on location at the Waldorf estate of Fear House. It's a haunted attraction in Layton, Pennsylvania. For a decade, the Poughkeepsie Tapes was stuff of legend. It was a type of movie that's only found in like a creepypasta. So if you believe the rumors, this documentary about a serial killer terrorizing Poughkeepsie, New York, used real footage of that man attacking, harming, and killing his victims. Obviously, it isn't the case since it's a completely fictional film about a made-up serial killer, but that hasn't kept the film from holding on to its true story legacy. So the movie opens with the discovery of the tapes themselves. After uncovering 10 bodies in a residential backyard, the police unearthed something far more menacing. Over 800 tapes from the killer, each detailing his heinous exploits. Composed of this found footage, interviews with experts, and one victim's testimony, the movie pieces together the story of the Water Street Butcher. Now, it's kind of a hard flick to watch, and it's best accompanied by a couple of trigger warnings. The eerie mimicry of early 2000s true crime shows like Forensic Files and Unsolved Mysteries is very convincing, making it difficult not to get sucked into the reality of it all. Like, even today, people are tricked into believing that the footage from the tapes is real, despite, the obvious pointing to the contrary. The claim to reality is a constant source of controversy for the film, as is its deeply unsettling content. But the thing that stands out most in complaints is that it wasn't the movie that people preemptively decided it should be. So it premiered in 2007 at the Tribeca Film Festival, where it was quickly snatched up by MGM for distribution. They marketed the movie heavily, but it would all prove a huge waste of money when the film mysteriously vanished from the studio's 2008 release schedule. Though you could find the movie at the time through less than legal means, it didn't get a wide release until it hit video on demand in 2014. Apparently, MGM thought they should be making more money off this venture, and then they pulled it for a never-to-be-seen theatrical release. Okay, finally, 2017, Shout Factory released the movie on DVD and Blu-ray. Just more proof of the value of physical media. So for many of those early viewers, the fun of the mystery was the mystery. Is the footage real? Why did MGM pull it? Was it banned for being too extreme? This and a plethora, if you will, of other questions swirled around online forums in the time from those early trailers to the movie's eventual home release. Yes, the killer's tapes in the movie are graphic, but not in the way people expect. A lot of the violence is off-screen, it's implied or described, but never shown outright, and it forces the audience to imagine the most disturbing moment. Spoiler alert, in what's called the scariest scene in the movie, the killer, posing as a police officer, picks up a hitchhiking woman looking for a ride to the nearest gas station, and when he drives past the station, the woman's face falls into an expression of absolute dread. because she realizes it's no police officer. And over the next 6 minutes, the audience is forced to watch as she hopelessly pleads for her life. If that doesn't terrify you, damn, I wish. Alrighty, next up we have a movie that's so heinous, I'm not even supposed to be talking about it. Actually, I can't even say its title, but let's call it the people-eating mass extinction event of the 1930s. And it's been highly regarded as the first real big found footage movie of all time. Ergo, I wasn't going to leave it off today's list. This flick from director Ruggero Deodato wasn't his first movie about people eating, but it was definitely the one that got the most flack from the media. He'd been making films since the 1960s, and he had this trademark style. Flashy, grimy pictures with a hardened edge and plenty of coitus and violence. He was one of many Italian directors who facilitated the people eating boom of the late 70s, and he'd already made one such film, The Last C-Word World, before he got around to this one. So, despite his sensationalist style, he'd already proven himself not only a very competent director, but one with depth and ideas worthy of cinematic examination. So this is the story of a professor journeying to the Amazon to discover what happens to a film crew of missing brave young Americans, only to realize that this characterization couldn't have been further from the truth. From the offset, this movie looks at how the mass media portrays its fellow Americans, the marginalization of those outside the land of the free, and what it means to be civilized. The young filmmakers are immediately positioned by the media as victims of local savagery, and when anthropologist Dr. Monroe is set to find them, it is only through his embracing of the local people that he comes across the lost film reels that's gonna piece this whole puzzle together. Broadcasting executives back in New York are foaming at the mouth at the prospect of a new documentary, even more sensational than the crew's previous works, and they're so focused on sensation and viewing figures that the sizzle reel they show includes, the gang forcibly amputating the leg of their guide literal seconds after he suffers a snake bite. And that's about all I can talk about in detail because, I don't want to get in trouble. As is the case with a lot of old school exploitation flicks, the reels were seized. Why? They were, obscene. But then something crazy happened. Those same reels became evidence in criminal proceedings. This wasn't just a plain old, too devious for public consumption theatrical release. People thought this was a snuff film. And apparently the weirdos who made it were so brazen in their criminality that they were going to throw this big premiere. So the director was brought up on killing charges and was actually forced to bring his actors in for interviews to prove they were still alive, and then demonstrated how they performed some of the special effects. Thankfully, eventually those charges were dismissed. And perhaps slightly more in keeping with Italy's progressive artistic reputation, the courts eventually overturned the movie's ban several years later. But by this point, the director and several of his associates had suffered considerable legal troubles, and countries around the world were banning it, or at the very least censoring it heavily. Now, this film isn't entirely innocent. Although 6 animal deaths appeared on screen, 7 animals were killed for the production, since the scene depicting the monkey's death was done twice, resulting in the death of 2 monkeys. So, I'm not saying I condone this film, but you've got to give it its point in history. And finally, how could I end today without the Blair Witch Project, the pioneer of the found footage genre of horror that we know today. It's a movie with a handheld camera and a dream. When this film came out in 1999, so many folks thought it was real, and it set the tone for what we know as found footage today. Co-written and co-directed by Eduardo Sanchez and Daniel Myrick, the film is about college students investigating the legend of a witch in the woods of Maryland, the shaky camera work, the creepy nature of the forest, and the fact that the movie features characters who feel like regular people all contribute to the film's terrifying tone and legacy. While many horror movies have famous imagery, including iconic villains from slasher movies like Michael Myers from Halloween, Ghostface from Scream, the black and white images of the Blair Witch Project are just as memorable. Personally for me, one of the most unforgettable images, the stick figures that are present in the woods. One co-director, Daniel, he told The Guardian in an interview in 2018 that originally, way back when, he began thinking about a stick figure, and it snowballed, and that's how the movie began. Apparently, he grew up in the woods and swamps of Florida, and for a long time, he had this idea of seeing a stick figure hanging from a tree, and it creeped the hell out of him. That's how you have it, folks. According to astonishing legends, the Blair Witch is actually thought to be based on the story of Moll Dyer, who happens to be one of my favorite witches throughout history to talk about. She is thought to have lived in the 17th century, and she lived alone near Leonardtown. Now, a lot of folks didn't know much about her. She was very mysterious. She was a healer, and people think that a rock in the area has a mark that looks like her handprint. Well, her handprint when she passed. How did that happen? Well, a group of men attacked her, and they were cursed with terrible luck because, she cursed them for doing bad things, which suggested that she was maybe a witch, involved in something dark. Because back then, if you were convicted of being a witch, that was pretty much a death sentence. And that's it for me once again, folks. I've been Alexa, the resident Ookie Spooky Girly. And hey, if you enjoyed my ramblings today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hit the bell for more found footage chatter from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.